saying is no.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back. Well, actually, to the first episode today. What are we
Episode.
listening to in the background there?
I'm trying to find the live to link it to somebody.
Oh, okay.
But that was one of
I
that was
heard
one of our
myself, and
videos.
I'm like, but that I even
Yeah,
said that recently.
that was one of our videos. I'm trying to figure out how to link it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, listen, I wanted to make sure that we're reaching out and touching everybody a little bit. That sounded really bad, but I'm talking about the
Gonna touch
12,
everyone.
the 12 laws of the universe. This is not anything deep and dark, but it is part of our gray matter series where we're just going to look at like, how is it that we're thinking? Why are we thinking this way? Scientifically, how does this fit into a biological framework? And this is the 12 laws of the universe. So, welcome to the show, everybody. We've got Eddie, the ethereal chemist, over here. And we've, of course, got Jake and Tori, who are spiritual helpers and healers for folks in their own right in multiple different states at this point
Except
as
I
we're moving
couldn't heal his
across
cold.
country. And but there's all three of these folks are some of the smartest people I've ever known. So I'm really, really excited to have you guys here on the show. We're going to be talking about the 12 laws of the universe. If you don't know what they are, they're fundamental to everything. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up to Tori first.
Oh,
And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I just want to have everybody introduce themselves, a little bit about their feeling about what the 12 laws are, how it applies, if anything does, just a general whatever opening.
so hey, I'm Tori. Pretty cool person. Okay, I'm boring. I'm a frazzled old mom. But as far as the 12 laws of the universe go, I would say that it it's like a framework that helps make sense of navigating physical reality, and in not even an overly spiritual way. I mean, I understand that it's very much a spiritual framework, but for me it's resonated in a very logical way where every single one of the laws feels like, oh, well, yeah, duh, that makes a lot of sense. I sometimes wouldn't have put it into those words, so that when it is organized in like this easy 12 points, it kind of helps organize my own beliefs and feelings about existence into something that is transferable and understandable to more than just me. Because I think we all have our own way of interpreting the things we feel about existence and consciousness, and don't necessarily have um the verbiage, the lexicon to maybe verbalize those ideas. And so the 12 laws make it really easy to talk about those more innermost held beliefs about things in a way that we can get a whole room talking about them, instead of like, I really only discuss this when I'm high with my husband, you know? So to me, that it's kind of like this foundational conversation facilitator.
Very well said. So, in regards to the 12 laws, then, is there a one in particular that always seems to come into your world? And we're going to go through what these are here in about 2 seconds, but which one pops into your head?
The law of vibration.
Why?
As someone who has um had music as just a core of part of who I am, and understanding that music is just a vibration. Um, I used to, when I was in high school, I used to have this little thing I wrote everywhere. It was just music is everything. And now, now I've been able to flip that, and everything is music because everything is vibrating. So to me, as a musician and singer, someone who's deepest passion is music, for me, that law makes all the sense because I've always kind of interpreted life that way. Like everything is music.
Everything is music. You're right. Everything is
Frequency.
frequency. Yeah,
Frequency. Yeah.
Hmm.
very well said. Jake, what's up with you, my friend? How are you? You look like you want to say about 12 words and just crawl under a rock right now. Are you not feeling well?
Oh,
Yes.
I just don't feel very good.
Yeah.
But I'm listening, and I'm an active participant.
So,
He's he's from about here to here, he's like all mucus.
Yeah,
Here to here.
I don't like
And
that.
I haven't done a healing dance on you. Maybe that's what it is.
that's what
I
needs
need
to
to do
happen.
my interpretive dance to get it to move.
A haka.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Except in a way that doesn't get me in trouble.
without going on a tangent, that has been really cool to see all over TikTok this last week.
Yeah.
It's
See what?
to see that.
The haka.
So New Zealand's parliament has a 21-year-old woman who has joined up, and in protest of this last colonial bill that they passed. I know very little about the background about it. She effectively started a haka in the middle
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
parliament and ripped up the bill, and it was just.
And then how many
So
people did they
powerful.
have gathered to do it all at once? 20?
Oh, they had it looked like at least
The
half
whole
of their
parliament.
stood up.
Yeah.
At least, nobody with white hair.
But then there was that
True.
massive gathering of people, like thousands of people were doing it.
But
Yeah.
in
So-
that scene in the parliament, you gotta look at the diversity in that room though. We don't have that, and we're supposed to be the melting pot.
No, we don't.
We're only everything's melted to the bottom. And all of the white stuff
Yeah.
The froth.
floated
The
to the
froth.
top.
Yeah.
Froth.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
the froth, which is, the least substantial part of any
Yep.
pot of anything, is at the top.
It's like
Right,
purifying
right.
gold.
Exactly.
Yeah, the garbage is on the top. The substance is on the bottom.
So you're talking about Titanic, is what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah. Is that what we call them America now? The Titanic?
Might as well be.
Might as
Right.
well be.
Uh,
All right, so Jake, with just a couple of sentences, give us your favorite 12 laws. What's going on with them? How do you feel about it?
So the one that seems to have the biggest impact on my life, or the one I've always been focused on, is the law of cause and effect. And then recently it's been the law of polarity. And I think something that this awakening has done for a lot of people has made them come to terms with the fact that polarity does not necessarily mean good and evil. Uh, and I have to make this point because I feel like there's a lot of people right now, especially in the spiritual community, who spend a good amount of time pointing fingers at the right or the left, at a voter for Harris or a voter for Trump, and calling them evil. And it doesn't matter either side. They're
Doesn't
both
matter.
doing this. They're both
Right.
doing the same things to each other, and it's become this where the right, I feel like, seems to have adopted inclusive hatred. So let's take everybody's hatred and put it in,
Give it a voice.
give it a voice.
Exactly.
The left has done an exclusive hatred where if you don't
Hate these things, we hate you.
yes, exactly.
Oh wow.
And it's fascinating to me because having grown up with, I would feel, a decent amount of diversity economically, racially, probably not nearly as much as some of my peers. There's always common ground. And the common ground is often in that polarity and just the way that we view it
Mhm.
and the lens in which we look at truth. Um, and I realize this is more than a couple of sentences, but the 12 laws of the universe, in terms of historical background, and I've seen many people make this argument, and an argument could be made that the 7 laws or the 12 laws of the universe have been the framework on which most modern Western religions have been based in some form or fashion.
Right.
And that these ancient teachings of wisdom put forth by, as some would say, it was Hermes Trismegistus or Thoth or whoever, all seem to have some sort of influence on Christianity, Judaism, mythological histories like that of Egypt and
Pagan beliefs,
Rome
all
and
of it.
Greece and
Right.
Catholicism, all of it. And they've taken these laws and kind of contorted them and perverted them into a framework of, if you don't do things this way, you are not being wise. When in reality, the way that I read a lot of these laws is that they're actively benign and neutral, that there's nothing hard and fast about them other than that they themselves are hard and fast rules of the world that we live in. And it's not black or white. It is inclusive and all encompassing. And there's no way to avoid them.
It's true. You're exactly right. There's no way to avoid them, but they can work in your favor or against your favor based on that. Like you're talking about with a political or any type of a choice between something that you resonate with and something that you cause some kind of a dissonance with. Ultimately, you're creating that extension infinitely outward
You're
and back to you.
perpetuating the dissonance
Mhm.
inside yourself, which means it's going to project outside of yourself.
Jake, something that you just brought up, I want to make you aware that you've changed me in ways I can't even
Nah, bro, you changed
comprehend.
yourself.
No. Things you specifically said. Well, that's true. I accept that and thank you. But what I'm saying is you inspired me to think about things, and you did this in ways you probably don't even recognize just through your example, not necessarily in your words. We were having a conversation in a similar group session prior to going onto a stream, and I made a statement about something and made a comment about something that somebody else said. You did not correct me, but what you said was, yeah, we can remove the whole component of an entity being against another entity or an evil against another evil. We're here just to kind of recompartmentalize as we've been discombobulated from the hole that we were in, that UC, that universal, you know, wholeness that we are in our non-physical. But when we come back here, well, we have to find ourselves again. We have to find our self-awareness again. We have to figure out who we are. And then I know that I'm kind of going on a roundabout way, but here's the point. I was blaming everything on conspiracy for years. I built a lot of my fundamental reality on conspiracy. And a lot of people do because it's easy. It doesn't mean that the act that you're looking at isn't hidden. It doesn't mean that it's not there. It is, in fact, by definition, a conspiracy. And I agree that there are things we don't know and things that we've been lied about. But I can't blame those things for my place in this reality because of the 12 laws. Because I choose neutrality instead of one of those pole extremes, which goes back to this point. And that's because I let go of trying to blame something else, which in fact has kept me from growing.
Well, it's that law of reciprocity or law of attraction. If you're putting out the idea of conspiracy, that's what you get back. Which brings to mind to me, you guys watch the Octopus Murders on Netflix?
No, I should, I guess.
No.
You gotta watch it. If first of all, if you want to talk about something that I think is probably tied into the whole UAP UFO thing without actually showing any evidence to be connected to that, it's a wonderful documentary. But the whole point is background of this documentary is about a reporter in the late 80s and early 90s who was going around investigating these octopus murders. And what he was discovering is that
Can you clarify? The, uh, are we talking about murder of people or octopus?
they call it he called it, so I'm getting to that. So
Okay.
he eventually called them the
I thought
octopus.
you were talking to me, and I was like, "What did I do?"
Yeah.
No, I have not seen this documentary, so I'm going off no context.
Okay.
He goes and he investigates these things. He's starting to drudge up a lot of material and investigative journalism that has to do with connecting multiple layers of the US government, almost every three-letter agency, giant corporations, the mafia, religion. And he's calling it the octopus murders because there are effectively 8 arms of this thing that are reaching out and creating a kind of conspiracy within the US government about how things are governed and how things move and shift. And as he continues to investigate, he finds himself digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And as he's doing this, his family and friends are noting that he just seems to be, his whole persona is shifting, and he's becoming more paranoid, and he's becoming more unhappy, and he's becoming more fearful and afraid.
Mm.
And all of these things that he's discovering, most of them are true and validatable by the investigative reporting that he's doing. And he's pulling these sources from the US government that are pretty much backing up everything that he's saying. But he actually finds himself, he gets killed. Many people, and it was formed as a apparent suicide. But there's a bunch of conspiracy around that too, and the thought just becomes, and at the end of the movie, or the end of the documentary, I think it was like his sister or there's someone close to him came on the screen and said the difference was when he chose that he would have rather had that and thought what he was doing was good, and he turned away from all of the really good things in his life, like his family and his friends and
Because he was on
his other
Mhm.
passions, because
Right.
this one thing had become such an obsession, and he wanted so badly to expose it that even in the mindset, whether or not the conspiracy is actually true, in his mind, it had become all consuming. And so it was the only thing that he could see. And ultimately, it led him to his demise because that's what he was focusing his attention on.
Right.
And I think that's where this conspiratorial attitude, like if you go into any sort of David Icke or a lot of these spiritual community members on TikTok, they constantly want to talk about this conspiracy about how we're being controlled. Well, congratulations, you're still being controlled by this.
Exactly. It's the
by
same thing.
by this being the only form of engagement you have in your life. If you're not doing something else and this is all you're worried about, that's what you're going to draw to you.
Mhm. Exactly.
So when aliens are trying to draw them to.
Yes. Yeah. Mhm.
So, listen, I want to keep that going, but Eddie, we haven't even gotten through the introductions. We've already
Yeah,
been
Oh, sorry.
sidetracked.
we got around.
No, this is fantastic. Listen, there is no plan here. The plan is everything is going to happen the way it's going to happen. 5 minutes before you got here, I couldn't even figure out why I couldn't hear myself, and yet it worked
Right.
last night. So, what are you going to do? So, to Eddie, tell us a little bit about your thoughts, who, what, and 12 laws, all the same stuff.
Okay, so the 12 laws. I just found out about the 12 laws 72 hours ago, and but that doesn't change its validity and the reality of it and its effect on my life. And I'm delving right now into the whole oneness, the divine oneness, and I actually made a video earlier about it, and it's like, pow! It's stuff that I know, a lot of things that I already know, but it's just like putting it together. I never knew this existed. My spirituality led me to different places in different ways. But like Jake had said a couple of videos before, it's like it all leads to the same place, and the truth is the truth,
Mhm.
and that doesn't change. So yeah, right now the one I've been looking into the most, divine oneness. So that's my favorite for now.
That's a good one.
I feel like there's definitely a reason that one comes first. It informs the subsequent laws, I think. When you understand the oneness of everything and of everyone, you can you now have a working framework to put the rest of the laws into and context for it. And a big reason why for it. You know, there's a lot of these laws of the universe that may not apply to anything if you don't embrace this first law of oneness, where that's why it matters. That's why the laws matter, is the oneness of it all, is to continually seek to be one and to see each other as one and to apply the subsequent laws of the universe into that ideal.
Uh-oh.
You know, they made it longer than I thought they would before tattling on each other, so we're doing good. They're struggling to embrace the law of one.
That's really funny. So, Eddie, thank you. And that's incredible that you're now. So, overall, I mean, breaking down the laws of the universe is something that will never be completely understood because it is personal and yet fits with everything. So, and
Right.
the thing is, though, is that there are some specific parts of the laws, and I know that I'm kind of preaching to the choir in this room. But what I want to do here is I just want to show you for a second here something. I don't know if you're able to see this or not, but what I'm going to do here is, where am I here on this thing? There it is. Okay, so let's do this. There are 5 fundamental rules that are relevant to the 12 laws. And I want to kind of walk through those first. And simply put, I guess we'll walk through the actual laws first, but then we'll move on from there. We have the law of vibration. These are not necessarily in order, but what is the order? It's how you deal with it. It's how it comes into your life, whatever's happening. So, Eddie, you talked about the law of divine oneness. We'll talk about that one first. What is that? It's a Now I'm gonna kind of comment on here for a second about this in a way that makes it relevant to me because you can't comment it in any other way.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just make this nice and big here because I don't want to switch screens. Oh, I don't want to switch screens on us here. So if you're able to see that, great. But in essence, what we're doing here is we're talking about the 12 laws of the universe. And when we're looking at this, the law of divine oneness, for me, I live in a world of divine oneness where everything is connected to everything else. Everything I do, everything I say and think and believe affects others and the universe around us. Now, we're not going to break this all down right now, but what I do want to know is this. Do you guys agree with that statement?
That everything is connected.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I do. I think sometimes in ways that are imperceptible to us.
hmm Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
And
So,
it,
go ahead.
I just wanted to point out too, it's interesting to me because I've got the Kabbalion sitting right next to me too. And I just for fun, I pulled up the 12 laws on Chat GPT and then I've got the Kabbalion here.
Yeah.
And it's in funny enough in the Kabbalion, The first law is not the law of oneness; it's the law of mentalism,
Mm.
Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
which strikes me as interesting, even coming from that book, because it takes a bit when you call it just the law of mentalism and how everything is mental, and that we are the mind of spirit, or we are the mind of source. It, at least for me, and maybe not for y'all, but takes a certain kind of, it takes the heart out of it. It takes a certain amount of spirituality out of it to just call it the law of mentalism.
I would agree with that 100%.
Um, which I also find, it's like, why are we constantly trying to remove the emotional component
And
from
the spiritual
all in the
component.
spiritual component from this?
Because we think we can't measure it.
Even in a book about spirituality and hermetic philosophy.
Well, I suppose those things are two different things. If you look at them straightforward, we are putting them in a framework of being the same, but um, we seem to have a human history of trying to measure anything we can possibly measure and quantify it. And spirit has been this ever elusive, unmeasurable, unknowable thing. But maybe it's simply because we put a lot of it can't be known on spirit, even though we're sitting here living, breathing beings that think and perceive. That is spirit. And I feel like we overcomplicate that.
Well, I don't even know that we overcomplicate. I agree. I I would put it in the frame just for my own thinking. I don't even know that we overcomplicate it. If you go with the Taoist philosophy, it is inherently unknowable, and yet you can know it within yourself, and that's the whole point.
Right.
It's a matter of introspection and not evidence from the external to dictate.
Yeah. Eddie, what's your thought?
As far as what?
Let's move on. Okay. I thought you were going to say something. Yeah, you're
No.
right. Go ahead.
I'm listening. I'm soaking it up.
Well, don't do that. I'm full of shit.
Well, I'm a rock.
No, you're full of you're full of mucus.
Full of mucus, yeah. I'm full of fluid shit right now.
Well, that's what everybody thinks, that we're all full of shit anyway. So.
Well, that was my working philosophy through most of my 20s. This was quite literally, it's all bullshit. It's just a matter of which bullshit you're gonna eat and
Right.
shovel.
No, but this is great. I mean, it's just the whole process of figuring out who we are. Like I just started putting those verses. I woke up this morning and you know, El was telling me on some of the things on his chain or whatnot, and how he's been called El, and I was like, well, that's kind of like means God, and
Nah, that's just my initials, bro.
no,
ELH.
wait,
No, 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 no. We're not gonna. Don't even go down that road. That is nothing. I'm gonna even. Number one, it would be with a little G. All right. And number two, so are you. So don't be throwing that around casually until you
okay.
know.
So, but
All
I'll
right.
continue with what I was saying. So in I was talking about Genesis today, on how in Genesis 1:26 it says, "Let us create man under our image, under our likeness." And in that context, God was Elohim in the Hebrew, which is God in plural. And it's a plural thing that's being stated. So I'm just putting all this together. When I woke up this morning, I was like, I knew a lot of this information, And it was the same thing. We go into how Moses asked, who do I tell the Pharaoh that sent me? And he said, I am. So when we say something like I am, we're talking about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So it is me who's been sent, and I
Exactly.
am.
A
Mm-hmm.
very Descartes view.
Yeah. And same
Yeah.
thing. Same thing with Jesus or Yeshua or however you want to pronounce it. He was, I am the vine. I am the life. I am the good shepherd. He is, and his whole purpose was to be one
Mm-hmm.
with God, which is the divine law. And it's funny because when they came to get him in the book of John, they said, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And he said, I am. And the moment he said, I am, all the soldiers were pushed back at the power that at that moment he was in one with God.
Hmm.
I mean, this is just one way of looking, but every religion, and I believe that's the whole purpose of every religion or every belief or every deity and magic, we are to become one with that energy,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the power is. That's where our intent goes up 1,000,000%, because we're creating, because we were meant to create, because we are divine oneness.
The verse that comes to me a lot when we talk about oneness with God, I don't know the reference, but it is the verse that says, "Be still and know that I am God." Um, I I believe that there is a pause that belongs there.
Mhm.
Not
Salah.
be still and know that I'm God. Okay, I know that. What do I do with it? No, be still and know I am God.
Yes.
You are God.
Mhm.
Be still and know that you are God.
Mm.
Without you, nothing exists. Period.
Right.
Seriously. And you close your eyes, it's still there. But when your spirit is gone, your holier godliness is no longer embodying the meat that we contain. Well, nothing else exists either for you. Everything is
Mm.
gone because you're creating it. Which, by the way, brings us back to the first thing I was going to say here, which is there are 5 fundamental rules to the 12 universal laws, because we're going to be finishing this up here in about 15 minutes as we're going an hour. So, but they transcend all space and time. All else, even physics, can be changed.
I
But
think.
these, go ahead. What are you saying?
Well, I would argue that the physics is inherent within the laws themselves, and that
Exactly.
maybe, and that and that they are not oppositional forces or dictatorial forces one upon the other.
Mhm.
That's
That that physics is a, at least our creation of it is a mathematical model and representation of what we are trying to establish as an esoteric metaphysical concept. And God, I wish I had that book. You guys have got to read it. Eddie, you got to read this. I think it'll blow your hair back. The book is called The Tao of Physics.
The
It
mm,
Tao
was
of
written.
Physics.
I have it.
It was written by an Austrian astrophysicist back in the 1960s and 70s named Fritjof Capra. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. And he's still lauded as one of the great metaphysical and physical thinkers of his time. I don't understand why nobody is promoting this book more, because he literally takes these astrophysical and quantum physics concepts and
Mhm.
spreads them across. Uh, I hope I'm using this term right. The diaspora. I don't think I am. I'm gonna Google that when I'm done. Of all the world's religions, especially the oldest, the Hindu, the Tao, uh,
Mhm.
Buddhism. and just how the Eastern mysticism seemed to have more of an acknowledgement and conceptual basis for these laws of
Sciences.
physics that we are
Mhm.
now unfolding in this last 20th and
Exactly.
21st century.
And they're
Mhm.
using it within their practices of daily life. It is
Mm.
in many ways, it's not even something that they're going to study. They're not going to find it. It's already there. It's intrinsic and it's taught from birth.
Yes, and the way that they adopt it. No, I've used that very loosely.
It's all good.
That's a I got it. I got what you were saying. The
Yeah,
canvas.
yeah.
That was a Hail Mary of a vocabulary word.
Yeah. But getting back on track here, I just want to close with this, or at least kind of open this up before we close. And that is that you're right. And thank you for pointing that out, because as we go down beyond these principles, then there are the laws. But these are the principles that we maintain first. Number one, I exist. Number two, everything is happening right now.
Right.
Mm,
Number three, we are all one.
mm,
And number four, what you put out is what you get back.
Mhm.
These are basic child school kind
100%.
of things.
Yep.
And number five, everything changes except the first four laws, which are, of course, the law of oneness, the law of vibration, the law of action, and the law of correspondence, or these principles. I exist. Everything is happening now. You get my point here. Okay. Now, I never got a chance to say what I wanted to say about my favorite law. I'm going to do that. But first, I want you guys to kind of give me some feedback on this little principle thing here, which, by the way, I didn't write. That's just something that through research, it became evident. I'm waiting for Jake to jump in here with his philosophy.
Everything is happening now is one of those real big mind fucks
Uh-huh.
that
Mhm.
That just passed.
when you start understanding it, you realize you can't possibly truly understand it because our brains are just too limited in this now moment, in this now setting of limitation or perceived limitation. But um I did have a very trippy experience where I saw it. I saw how time is not a line but a landscape. Time is a scape, not a line.
Mhm.
And
A flat circle.
right, it's like a big flat circle and it is all happening right
Right now.
now throughout everything. And that's the best way I've been able to really grasp that principle is when I was able to like see it like a maze, like a big giant maze where the walls separate us in our now moments, but they're all interconnected and everything is still happening right now. So everything you've ever done is something you're doing right now. You're just not perceiving it in your now moment. Every past life you've ever had is happening right now.
Mhm.
Which once you start understanding, you realize that there's potential for it to be manipulated, and you can start challenging your own perception of reality. Of if I can change in this moment, that means I can change in that moment,
Mhm.
even separated by entire lifetimes.
Yes. And Eddie, what were we just talking about last
It was
night?
what we were talking about last night.
And
Once we
what
put that intent and we
was it
record it,
foo-foo? Was it
there's a
foo-foo or
change.
was it science?
It was science.
What science was it?
What do you mean? What science
What
was it?
science was it we were talking about? We were talking about quantum physics
Quantum physics, correct, which
and
is the
the
spiritual.
and it was entanglement, the principle of
Entanglement.
entanglement,
Yes.
right? That's exactly
When
what you
they
just
began to
described.
record, the wave changed into what we were studying. It focused for us in that moment, but it was still a wave.
Well, when we flip the penny, it can flip on the other side of space-time interdimensionally at exactly no time delay. In fact, it can actually precede because of intent.
So I think so we can go the quantum physics route, absolutely. I think for a lot of people, because even me, because I often struggle going the quantum physics route as much as I like it because I can't do the math behind it. And so it's like, well, I can't prove it with numbers myself, so can I really speak intelligently to it? And even though I feel that I can in one regard, on the other side, I'm like, I can't do the math, so I'm disqualified in some
Right.
regard, right?
Like we can talk about
So
quantum physics, but it doesn't mean we necessarily
can do the equations.
right
So
understand
I
it.
go when I hear concepts like this, I go the psychological route. So like the Philip Zimbardo Stanford prison experiment,
Mhm.
where literally you took a bunch of college students and you put them in a scenario, a facade
Mhm.
of a prison, and you made some of them prisoners and you made some of them prison guards. And they almost immediately, just out of their own perception of the role that they thought they were supposed to play, fell into these roles of the prisoners and the guards. And they started to effectively battle each other and
Right. Interact
antagonize
as
each other
though
Mm.
you are being jailed by your classmate.
because that was their perception of those moments.
Mhm.
And it's like,
Like if we perceived prison guards to be your friendly food bringers, like, yeah, you live in a box, but like, hey, the prison guard is here. He has our food. Yay.
but
How
yeah.
differently would that experiment have gone?
So, and that's the same with the Stanley Milgram experiment. It's funny, those both stick out to me in my brain because both of them are literally quite an example of your perception dictates your
Mm.
reality.
Mm.
Right.
And your perception of authority, especially, will
Mhm.
dictate your reality and
Mhm.
dictate how it is you navigate the world.
So are they all locked in this same prison, in this same box?
It was a college campus. It wasn't even a real prison. They had
Right.
just set one
But
up.
just in the image, wouldn't they all be prisoners?
Yes, yes, effectively playing the roles that they were told to play by the
That's pretty
experimenter.
deep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Isn't that exactly what our reality is?
Yep.
Yeah.
We start growing up and start being told to play certain roles, and we play them really well. And then every now and then we think, do we really want to be doing this? Is this really how we want reality to look? Because this sucks.
Who said that's a rock?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I've been thinking about that from like the millennial perspective too, because Tori and I don't know about you guys growing up in school, but so from church to school, we were indoctrinated with, I
Hmm.
swear to God, in my schools, I was taught you are the generation that is going to change the world. That is what we were taught in my
Mhm.
school. And my
And in
church
church, we're
was
taught
saying the
we're
same
the
thing.
generation that's going to bring and see the second coming of Christ. Like
Yes.
we're the chosen generation that was going to see Jesus again.
So, and then we walk around through our lives with this kind of belief undercurrent that that is our purpose as
Greater good. When I go work my long ass hours and then pick up extra hustle on the weekend, whose greater good is that contributing to?
and how am I filling my cup to make sure that what I'm serving is
Quality.
good for
Yeah.
other people.
Wow. You just took a giant theory and brought it down into a crystallization of a real world scenario using actual fact-based information, and that's why this community exists.
I think Well, I'm glad you feel that way. I think that's what's necessary here. And this is why I always say the same thing and why I always argue the same things. Like we can talk about this stuff from a very esoteric and metaphysical level, but there is an entire faction of our population who is embroiled in intellectualism and needs physical material models of everything represented to them in order to accept them as any sort of truth of any kind.
Mhm.
And they need the data and they need the the mathematics behind it. And the thing about these individuals, these intellectuals, is they're not, generally speaking, they're not bad people. But and I put myself in that same category for a long time. If you didn't have data, I didn't believe you. And I didn't care what you had to say. And it was that, and it was literally just because every other spiritual and religious institution in my life would tell me these truths, right? And I could not see them made manifest in my life.
And you also
But
weren't allowed to question
and I
them.
wasn't allowed to question them, but in science, that's encouraged, at least the science that existed 15, 20 years ago. Now I'm hearing in the scientific community, in some circles, maybe not all, that it's Stephen Greer has said, they're not separate from each other. They are the same, and they should be presented as such.
And this idea that we can't have intuition involved in science is absurd. Like I think the biggest example of this for me was I was reading an article about an orangutan
Yeah.
that rubbing the juices on it, and he didn't just go bungling about in the woods and rolling around in leaves. He picked a specific leaf, chewed it, and applied it. And anybody who I have talked about that happening with is like, that's really cool. That animal knew exactly what it needed. That animal was intentional because we intuitively know that.
Exactly.
We know that we can observe that animal doing. We may not be able to improve or communicate with them on the same consciousness level. We can inherently and intuitively know that that animal knew the leaf was going to heal him. But the scientific community of the study would not come out and say that, and had to posit like maybe it just accidentally stumbled on this leaf, and there's no way to know if he did it intentionally. What do you mean there's no way to know? We watched him do it.
Yes.
But because you can't ask the monkey if he did it on purpose, we can't prove that he did. So now it's like you're sitting here not even acknowledging what you saw because the data doesn't support it. And
Right.
because you can't replicate it in a study.
But
That is
Hank,
insane to
let's
me.
take that a step further, though, and I'm going to bring it back to science for a second, because that's my angle here. And that is that every one of these mathematical formulas that is not fully contained has to insert a component to make it fully contained. That component does not exist. It is called dark matter, or used to be called ether, which represents spirituality, which represents alchemy, and then of course
Something we know is there, but we can't see it or measure it.
And not
Exactly.
only that, not only that, but if you read the history of quantum physics, so I downloaded a beginner's guide to quantum physics on my Kindle, and I was reading it once. How much these early quantum physicists that we now tout as brilliant minds, Heisenberg and Bohr and Einstein and Oppenheimer, these guys who were doing these equations, you would literally read about how they would literally invent the concept in their mind 40 years before they could write a mathematical equation for
Yes.
it to validate it.
Yes.
and they were able to run these experiments without the mathematical concepts
Yes.
present and prove them, and they won Nobel prizes for it.
Mm-hmm.
And the math didn't come until 20, 30 years later in some cases.
Einstein's theory of relativity
You can
equals MC
win
squared
awards
wasn't
for
improved.
theory
Black hole
in
math, all
science.
of it.
Right. And so the fact that we're
What did you say,
so
Tori?
hung
I
up.
missed it. I was talking over you. What did you say, Tori?
Oh no, I was just pontificating. Like, it's funny, you can win an award for theorizing in
Yes.
science. You didn't prove shit. Your theory was just
It's
really
a
good.
theory.
And so we gave you an award. But you can't you don't get that kind of freedom
No.
now. You have to prove it.
This doesn't work. We're missing something. So let's just, you know what? It doesn't really matter. So we'll just call it dark matter. It doesn't really
Right.
matter.
And I've made
Right.
this argument. I've made this argument similar to this about the whole UFO thing, especially early on when people are like, no, it doesn't actually exist, blah 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 blah. They're like, if you don't have any data on it, it does not exist. And I made and I remember having this argument with my dad once, and I went, okay, Dad, let's suspend all disbelief for a second. I'm going to take you back in a time machine back to 1800s, okay? And I want you to bring a whole bunch of research analysts with you to get the data on how many human beings can fly. They're going to come back and tell you 0% of the population can fly. And that would be an accurate assessment for that time. And the data would show nobody can fly. Now take those same researchers 150 years into the future and ask them how many people can fly. And they're going to come up with the data. 50% of the population or more probably has access to air travel of some kind.
If you could afford a ticket.
And can fly. Who can afford it.
Right.
Can
But it's
fly.
empirically data driven that people can fly.
But we literally had to create that possibility as humanity. It didn't just.
I remember your
nobody
dad
looked
being
at the
really
data.
annoyed by that because he couldn't say no to it.
Yes. And
he was like, you're right, but what does that have to do with that now? Like so that means right now it still doesn't matter because people still can't fly. Right?
So you're not going to try.
Right.
That's ultimately
that's the
the
whole
argument
point.
that I was making, because he was asking me, I think and this is no disrespect to my dad. I love my dad. But he was asking me, how is it, do you think, in a very kind of condescending tone, how is it, do you think, that these people are having interactions with extraterrestrials? And I said, they're creating them, Dad.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's just phooey. That doesn't make any sense.
We're learning how to talk to whales. Like, full stop.
Right.
We are using AI
Mm-hmm.
to interpret whale lexicon because we have now acknowledged that they have a codex of language.
Yes.
We simply can't interpret it.
You ever seen your...
We were able to signal to a whale and have it signal back to us. We may not know what we said. We may not know what they said, but we understand we had a conversation with that whale.
Mm-hmm.
And 30 years ago, we would have just assumed that kind of communication between species.
Think back to, and that kind of opens up the door of different levels, and to think back to, and that kind of opens up the door of different levels and different kinds of intelligence too. Early on, and I know someone needs to fact check me on this, because God knows I'm not going to go back and do it. When I was in college, there was a we were studying IQ and the creation of IQ test, and how early on, because IQ tests were created by white Europeans,
Mm-hmm.
we would go around and have everybody else in the world take these IQ tests, and they would score lower than the white Europeans. Until finally we get to the 60s and 70s, where our psychologists finally asked the question, maybe it's because none of these guys speak English. And so they created a geometric and like a pattern and shape-based test to test intellectual, to test IQ, so that it was not contingent upon the language they spoke.
or
and
even a
they go out
cultural understanding.
and they
Wow.
go out and what they do to really test it is they test white Europeans against tribal communities that have no access to electricity, technology development of any kind, and they go and they test these tribes, and wouldn't you know it, a lot of these tribes scored higher than the white Europeans
Oh
in the
Huh.
yeah,
tests.
yeah. They rolls in the windows. You know what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
They're talking.
Uh-huh.
There's no
Hmm.
question. You know, and
For
if you want
sure.
to get down into it, what would prey and being a prey or a the one who's attacking. I can't think of the right word for it. Prey or the
Predator.
predator.
Predator and
Thank
prey.
you. Yeah, I mean, what's that? Is that just a communication that doesn't exist? Or is that a different type of communication? It doesn't always have to be the communication we think. In fact, that's what we're talking about
Right.
here with all these 12 laws. And like Jake said, it went all crazy. But hey, we're going to end this thing. I want to do this. I want to go to my
Yes.
favorite law here, and that's showing right now. It is called the law of perpetual transmutation of energy. The reason I think it became my favorite is because I had no idea what it meant. And so I kept trying to figure out what it meant. And it has transformed my life because I used to take everything as a simple grain of salt. If it impacted my world, it would affect me. And so, on a
Mhm.
personal level, now when somebody says something or it doesn't go my way and I'm not feeling good about that, which doesn't really happen so much anymore because I've identified with the perpetual transmutation of energy where everything it is energy and it always will dissipate back into a different form of energy. It cannot go away. I shouldn't say dissipate, it will transform into a or transmutate into a different form of energy
Mm,
always. So if you're looking at it like I wrote this here, energy never goes away, it transforms. This law is so important to practice. This is for me, remember,
mm,
daily, so that I feel better and more positive every day. Good feelings are the key to higher and higher vibrational frequencies. The law of perpetual transmutation of energy states that I have within my power the ability to change any and all conditions in my life, replacing bad vibrations and frequencies with good ones or low vibrations with high ones. I control this by focusing only on what makes me feel good, thus creating a higher vibration. Higher vibrations consume, just like light consumes dark, consume and transform those lower vibrational tones. Thus, I can change the energies of my life by understanding the universal laws and applying the principles in such a way as to create the changes I desire. So I was feeling
yeah, he
attacked.
keeps freezing.
Sorry.
You're freezing on alchemy.
Yeah.
Well, it must be important then. That's all.
Stop transmuting. It's disrupting the signal.
Yeah.
I know, right? But no, I mean, I've had, within the last couple months, I've had a lot of people disappear out of my life because of choices that I chose and paths I chose to take,
Yeah,
which didn't
what's that about?
necessarily agree with their perspective or their goal. And that's not really my opinion. And it hurt because these are people that were my friends. At least I thought so. They said so. They said that, but ultimately they wouldn't even acknowledge what I was thinking about, let alone what I might say or what I might say, let alone what I'm thinking about and be there for me. That just what didn't exist. And so I had to deal. And that was, I think, the time where I really focused and decided to make a video so I could speak it out and create through action my intention. And all of a sudden, those feelings were gone. Now, don't get me wrong, later on, it came back up. It hit me again, but I was so much more in control of it. The second it did, I
Mm,
pushed it right back down. Not pushed it down. I allowed it to be. I allowed it to be. Let it be its pain in the butt feeling. But I'm just not going to focus there because that ice cream's awesome. And I just don't eat the ice cream. It's just the ice cream's idea.
Well, I get what you're saying, but I
yeah.
think that's what's important, right? Because what you've effectively done is you've lended credence against the philosophy of hedonic pleasure, because I feel like that is what pervades a lot of the spiritual community on TikTok, especially more than anything. is, and that's what I fear more than anything, is that a lot of people are going to take from this idea that feeling good first is the most important thing.
Mm.
Well, that
No.
means that I get to go fuck
That
whoever I
right, that
want and take
disregards the
whatever I
law of
want.
like
And
polarity.
Yeah.
well, it's this idea of, you know, if life is meaningless, then I should just dive into hedonic pleasure and do anything that makes me happy, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the feelings of others, which turns into a kind of sociopathy.
Right.
But to
I'm
your
doing
point,
what feels good to me.
but to your point, Eric, what you just described is that in these moments where you had these kind of negative feelings erupt, it wasn't this pushing it away. No, I don't need that, because that, to me, that is sociopathy.
Right.
It's saying like, yeah, fuck these bad feelings. I'm going to do whatever I want
Yeah.
anyway.
It's going to come back.
Only
It's still
feel
there.
only feel good. You just allow them to rise, and you sit with them and you examine them and you go, are these attached to an action I've taken? Or is this a reflection of something I need to work out within myself
And
before
do
I
I have the
continue
power to
forward?
do that?
Right, right.
Yes.
Mhm.
Bashar's perspective on
Mhm. I love his
depression
perspective on
has
this.
helped me immensely.
Mhm.
This idea that it is not depression, it's compression.
Mhm.
Just because you want to be alone and don't want to be around anybody does not mean that you need to be sad about it. Just be
Exactly.
alone.
Just
Be away
choose.
from people for a minute.
Mhm.
Compress. Allow that to be a positive experience for you.
Right.
And it will be.
And it
That's
may not
exactly
be
right.
pleasant in the process, but the result can be positive. And I feel like we get caught in the it doesn't feel good to do this. So
Yes.
it's like this whole the whole trigger warning thing, right? Like I don't want to be triggered. Well, if you never allow yourself to be triggered, when are you analyzing those feelings that come up? Do you just want to live a life of ping-ponging around things that are hard to deal with?
Right.
Or do you want to look at that thing that makes you uncomfortable, that triggers you, and deal with why?
Do the work.
Well, and there's a TikToker that I follow called the Yeshuani, and she's got a great TikTok channel. If y'all want to pull it up and watch it, you should. Her videos are really quite amazing. She made the point about this too, and I'm curious. I'd be curious to see if this is actually the case. But she made the she doesn't call them predictions. They're just kind of her opinion on the world. She said that those who are neurodivergent or neurospicy that were placed in this world at this time were sent here specifically for the purpose of triggering people. That
Mhm.
is what they're here for. To get people to be the mirror to people's actions.
I trigger you all the time.
That's your job.
I'm doing you a favor by being so
and
spicy.
that's what she makes. She's like, your authenticity coming
Yeah.
out as you, not trying to suppress this aspect of your personality is what allowed others to be their full selves. We've steered very off the point of the laws.
Yeah, I'm actually
No.
half run as well, so.
Yeah,
Eddie,
it's
your
time
voice
to
just
wrap
went
it
weird,
up.
and I haven't touched
But it
anything.
was a pleasure being with all of you guys again, and I'm looking forward to it.
Your voice just went all weird, and I haven't
Oh,
touched
really?
anything. Yeah.
I guess that's the universe.
Yeah, I think that's
That's our
that's
cue.
our cue to shut it down.
All right, everybody. Have a good one.
Hey, wait a minute. Hang on before you just
Stay
disappear. I want to
classy,
say
Sandy.
this is really important. Listen, you guys, thank you for being here. Jake, Tori, this couldn't have been done in this manner. You brought this down to a real conversation that in just broadens it for other people. And Eddie, the fact that you are able to come and look at these things, literally, you said just a couple of days ago or hours ago, and you already bring with you such incredibly vast background and experience in your life. And so to be able to apply this immediately as you have look at this and say, yeah, I agree with this, I agree with this, I agree with this, I agree with this. And that's just it. They're intrinsic, they're simple. But the things is that we don't follow them. And I don't mean it's a book or a guide that you have to do that. I just mean if you're struggling, go back to the basics. This is kind of a rule book of how to just find your neutrality
Mm-hmm.
and engage in other things. As Jake says, yeah, but we're not going to talk about
Yes.
And then
that. What'd you say, Jake?
just allow them to be.
Yeah.
Just allow them to be.
Okay.
So
Anyway.
what we're going to do here now is we're going to just go ahead and set this up for next Sunday. However, I just want to remind everybody that we are currently doing every night at currently 10:30 p.m. just because it's working out at that time for us, but we may end up moving that to earlier at a future date. But yeah, that's our nightly, and all we're doing is we're keeping it really low key. We're focusing on what does basic science and how does it apply, and we're not talking about the science so much as how will it apply into our lives, similar to the 12 laws. But this is also more importantly a place where we'd rather talk about you. And I want to make sure that if anybody does get this to the end of this video,
Right.
just join us on that and let's just have a conversation, kind of like what we did today. It's just a later time frame for us. We don't have to talk about science. We just want to talk about people in this community. All right. So with that in mind, hey, I love you all, and
Yeah.
you guys all have a
Love you.
wonderful night, day, whatever it is. Peace.
All right. See ya.
Love you guys. Thank you.
All right, bye, you guys.
See ya.